Welcome to the Move to Costa Rica podcast. I'm your host, Malcolm Hill. Today we're speaking with Christopher Reidy, a Chicago native who moved to Costa Rica in 2015.
Malcolm, happy to be here, man. This is exciting. It's a beautiful Monday morning, drinking a cup of coffee. All is good over here. Thank you for the beautiful intro. Yes, I came here in 2015. And now I'm here in the middle of coronavirus pandemic and riding out the storm, and all's good. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited.
Dude, I'm really stoked to have you on the show. And for part of the reason I'm really excited to have Chris here today is obviously we're going to get into a lot of his story, but Chris doesn't live along the coastal region of Costa Rica. And I guess, I don't know the exact statistics, but the majority of foreigners who live in Costa Rica live on the coast, and that's what really attracts them to come here. But Chris has a different story to that because he's in a different place, which we're going to get into. Let's rewind, Chris, and start back in Chicago. Now, personally, I haven't visited Chicago, but all my friends who have been there have said to me, like, hey, it's just as cool as New York and LA and all the other epic cities in the US.
Yep.
How would you describe Chicago?
Chicago is a Goliath. It's enormous, but it's my hometown. I was born and raised there. All my family, a lot of family is still there in Chicago. It's an urban metropolis full of different cultures. It's the third largest city in the US, and it's got the worst winters ever. When I was living in Chicago, I played in a band. I was in a punk band. So the community that I was involved in, we played a lot of grungy bars and cold basements. And I was playing the bass guitar like live in front of an audience 3 or 4 times a week. So Chicago for me was this cultural community of music, of punk rock, of alternative living. But I know for a lot of people, it's kind of a central business district of lots of business and finance, and there's tech industries there. I mean, it's a Goliath. I think just in the surrounding area, Chicago Center and the surrounding suburbs, there's more people there than in the country of Costa Rica. So it's a completely different world. There's oftentimes I miss it, but I'm still here, right?
Yeah, you're still here. And was your whole childhood in Chicago?
I did move a few times. My parents split up and divorced when I was like 3 years old. So I didn't have that nuclear family household. Every weekend I was in the car going to my dad's house, wherever he lived, and he moved houses and apartments every 2 to 3 years. And so that theme continues for you. I know a lot of other expats have experienced moving as children, but I was born and raised more or less in the Chicago suburbs. I went to school in Ohio for university, and getting out of Chicago, going to this small little kind of farm town really opened up my eyes, and it led me to do a lot of camping. I did a lot of bike packing. I traveled from Chicago to North Carolina, living in a tent on a bicycle for 10 to 15 days. And so I was never one to say, I need to stay home. I mean, suburbia, a lot of Americans know, is not a very thrilling place to be an adult in, right? And so I knew that I needed something different. And although the city was giving me a little taste of something different, I needed to get out, definitely.
So even from a young age, you had that real push to get outdoors, to be part of nature.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed camping. I was a Boy Scout. Something about being outside, being in, surrounded by trees and nature, was always something connected to me. And I think being in Chicago, especially in the winter, it's like you can't go outside. You don't see the sun for 4 or 5 days at a time. And I think the lifestyle I was living of just like heavy drinking, concerts, playing music till 2 a.m., at these crappy little bars in Chicago. I was like, man, I need to get outside. I need to see the world a little, you know?
That's a very much like the band lifestyle is very much a nighttime lifestyle too. Like there's a lot of just dark hours.
Yeah, yeah. And like we weren't in it for the money. It was like a passion thing. So we're driving around a $800 van that's breaking down all the time and loading it like giant, you know, guitar amps and bass amps and drum kits. And it's like there was a romance to it, but I think after a year and a half, 2 years of that, and being a little older and not being 19, it was like, okay, I'm 25 and I'm still loading my guitar amp into the back of a van, and I earned $13 from that show. It's like, well, I got a few beers out of it. Like you get to a point where you're like, there's got to be more. There's got to be something else. And so I began to think that maybe teaching, maybe English, maybe the guitar, maybe music theory, maybe teaching was where I needed to be. And I saw maybe a TEFL degree where I could teach English and maybe actually make some decent money in Korea or in Japan, right, or Thailand. And I had a vague connection to an old high school friend who had done something similar. And so that itch began to grow of like, oh, wow. And as I began researching what the life in Thailand was, because I had never left the US, right? I had no idea. And I'd say it was probably within a year that I was down here. Take action. I can't live in this limbo. And I know this making $15 a show life isn't going to be for the long run, right? So yes, to answer your question, I think it was pretty quick. I was like, the itch started, and then I took action on the itch pretty quickly.
Of all the places you could travel to, why did you choose Costa Rica?
I'm gonna try to make a long story as short as I can, but basically, my father's childhood best friend moved to Costa Rica in the early 90s, and he married a Costa Rican woman named Hilda Paniagua. She's a saint. And Hilda and this guy Chuck, my good friend, or my father's good friend, they used to come up to the US and visit us for Thanksgiving and for different holidays. And so I kind of grew up through high school. I played on the baseball team. Chuck loved baseball. He would come to my baseball games. Later, he would go to my concerts, you know, when I played guitar. And Hilda would always kind of occasionally show up. Unfortunately, Chuck passed away, right? Passes away from leukemia. And Hilda comes up to Chicago for the funeral. And she is very adamant. She speaks at this time very good English. And she's very adamant about me going to Costa Rica, about helping her take care of her garden. Her husband just passed, and she needs a tough guy man to kind of help out around the house. And she's like, I know, you know, you got laid off and your dad filled me in on your situation. You know, why don't you just see something new? And I'm like, wow, this couldn't be more of a perfect timing thing. And so I didn't have much money at the time. I said, Hilda, I'm going to think about this. Like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I took a crappy job to make some quick money. And I was down here about 4 months after seeing her at the funeral. And she welcomed me with open arms. And she taught English here in the public school system for about 15 years. And so my third day in Costa Rica, I was in a public high school here, helping out the English department, reading different stories and explaining idioms and reading the lyrics of Eminem songs. And that experience is mind-blowing. But really, Costa Rica, people ask me this all the time, why Costa Rica, why Costa Rica? And I was like, Costa Rica kind of chose me on this. And I'm grateful for that, because I think the decision is a big one that I didn't have to make. You know, which country, is it Panama? Is it Nicaragua? And And Malcolm, I'm sure you can attest to this. People are always asking you, what's better? What's the cost of living? How much does this cost? Is it safe? Are the people nice? And it's like, I got lucky to not have to struggle with all those questions. Costa Rica picked me, welcomed me with open arms. And I had originally decided to be here for 3 months. I gave myself 3 months. And yeah, like your intro said, it's been about 5.5 years since I got here in 2015. Yeah, Hilda, I didn't know her at the time. She was just this Latino woman. Yeah, and I didn't speak any Spanish at the time. I had failed high school Spanish. I got to university. They came to me. They're like, all right, Mr. Reedy, you can either do 15 hours of history or 3 hours of Spanish to fulfill this credit. I went with history, right? and I ended up getting a minor in history just to avoid taking Spanish. So that opportunity approached me, and I said, man, at least I have a liaison into this. And after looking at TEFL programs, it's like, wow, they want $1,200, $1,500. I said, look, this is an opportunity for me to go see what teaching is like, to see what a new culture is like. And if I come out of it loving the experience, loving teaching, then I can pursue a more professional career in teaching English.
When you were saving for those 4 months to make the move and to come down to check out Costa Rica, you obviously shared your plans with family and friends. What responses did you get?
Yeah, a lot of hoorah, a lot of hell yeah, man, go make it happen. 3 months for a lot of people, it's like it's a summer vacation. I had no idea it was going to grow into this. I had no idea. So a lot of people were like, well, we'll see you, we'll see you in springtime. Cause I left in the early February where it was, 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit out. The roads were iced over. They were calling it Siberia, like it was freezing. So everybody is like, yeah, get out of here. Of course you want to go,
Those first 3 months were your first 3 months living anywhere outside of the US, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that there would have been some huge culture shocks in different ways. The language being one, just the way that kind of like Costa Ricans are just, they're different, like they're different people than your average person in Chicago, I would imagine. So in those first 3 or 6 months, what were the big things that really stuck out to you about this place?
I was absolutely in love with it. Like, just, I call it the gringo eyes, where it's like everything is beautiful, every single thing. And the way of life, and as we get further down the story, like I'll give it a little more of what I feel like today, but those first few weeks was euphoric. And I mean, just Hilda picking me up at the airport, it's like there's such a casualness to it. Chris, get in the car. I got to go fix my brakes, right? And so we're at this auto shop in the middle of Alajuela Centro. I had no idea where I was. My cell phone didn't work. I had no clue. And I'm just at the mercy of this Costa Rican woman who I know but don't, right? And we're getting the brakes fixed. She's yelling at the guy for, screwing up the paint job. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this would never, ever happen in the US like this introduction to the country. And she's like, come on, we'll go get a cup of coffee, right? And I'm in this auto shop drinking a crappy cold cup of coffee, eating saltine crackers, and just amazed by
Everything.
The extreme, like, intro to the country. It was like, boom, here you are, you're in the heart of it. And I mean, down to the architecture, we entered Hilda's home, everything's different. I grew up in Chicago, so there's carpeted floors and there's heating systems, and there's these locks and there's stairs in every house, and none of that down here. No basements, right? There's no basements in Costa Rica. you know, and then I'm living on the side of a coffee farm in Costa Rica, right? Hilda's got this beautiful garden and she's got all these plans of what we're going to grow aguacates, avocados, and we're going to grow. She had some tropical fruit growing. I think it was a granadilla, and she's screaming at me, "Granadilla, Christopher, granadilla!" And I'm like, I have no idea what the hell is going on, but I love it. I absolutely love it. I loved just being a I love being a minority, actually. I loved kind of like people not being able to assume anything about me. Um, right? You're in your culture back out in Chicago. It's like what you wear, where you go, what bars, the music, the friends, like all that has this identity around it. And I was down here, all that identity was just shattered. And I was given the privilege of defining my new identity here. I didn't have to break anything down. It was broken down for me. It was a clean slate, and I got to figure out who I wanted to be in this new crazy world. Right? There's this freedom of new identity, new self-realization of like, whoa, no one knows who I am. No one can perceive or assume or place any sort of identity on me until they speak to me, right? And and unfortunately, it's not like that everywhere in the world. Obviously, it's individually specific, but I'm walking around Alajuela Centro and everything. I mean, just the casualness of it. You walk into a cell phone store and I'm, yo quiero practicar mi español, right? And these women would just talk to me and talk to me, telling me about all their lives. And, you know, I'm like, I understand every 10th word of that, but the openness you have with me, you're not even trying to sell me anything. You're literally telling me about your grandkids, right? And to have that experience in Chicago, I just had never, ever walked into a commercial setting and people sharing with me a cup of coffee for free. Like there's no sort of bullshit, for lack of
Yeah.
better words, right?
You talked about having the clean slate and
Mm-hmm.
having the ability to build on like just who you were, you know, a 25-year-old guy, 26-year-old guy when you arrived, and nobody's looking at you with preconceived expectations, preconceived ideas, or any of that stuff. They just look at you and go, he doesn't look like he's from here, but he's probably friendly, so let's talk to him. You know,
Exactly.
that's about as complicated as it is, I feel, for most people, for most Costa Ricans when they meet a foreigner.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, oh wow. And what I began learning was that my English, just my native English, was of value to a lot of people. And so they would seek me out, and I was like, okay, if I can provide value to you, let's learn from one another. And let's you teach me, you know, Sarah and a star, or poor versus para. Like when do I use these words? Like I keep hearing them. And so I began to learn Spanish really quickly because I just loved talking to people. I loved socializing with new cultures and obviously a new language. And so there was a lot of exchange going on, a lot of cups of coffee at different coffee shops. And I've got friends who I still know, and I've got a friend who works for me today who we met in a coffee shop in Alajuela. So those first weeks were like ground breaking and solidifying a sort of love for being here. And I do try to remind myself, reconnect to those first moments here, because I can often lose it with the barking dogs and, you know, the barbed wire and the electrical wires going and the internet cutting out, right? There's plenty of, we'll get into that, I'm
If
sure.
there's
But
things you want to be frustrated about, there's plenty of those here too. They don't,
exactly.
you know, life's frustrations don't disappear just because you move country.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
They
exactly.
still they still exist. They're just different to the ones from Chicago, for example.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And that's something to remember. I remember bitching about parking tickets and crying about the internet bill because it was $80 a month or whatever it is in
Yeah,
Chicago, you
man.
know, the traffic.
I used to bitch about like I lost my driving license after going through a fixed speeding camera 4 times in 1 week after it got installed. And
Very
I
nice.
remember being extremely frustrated about that in Australia because I
Yep.
had to go to court and had to plead to keep my driver's license. And I'd clearly broken the law, but I was extremely frustrated at just how regulated it was. And then coming here and realizing, like, I don't even know if speeding tickets exist in this country. Maybe they do, but I have no idea. I've never seen anyone pay attention to a speed limit.
No way.
Well, not here in Guanacaste anyway, but yeah, the freedom is really nice. Chris, that leads me really well into my next question. Now, when most people think of Costa Rica, they imagine like sunny days and like beautiful beaches. Heredia, where you live, is in the Central Valley, and it's a different kettle of fish altogether, right? It's at altitude. There's far less foreigners up there living there as well.
Yep.
Can you explain to the listeners a little bit of what the environment's like where you live?
Well, first of all, I turned into a lobster in the sun after about 15 minutes. So I knew the beach wasn't going to be like a long-term place for me. But Heredia it's definitely a little colder, right? It's like you said, it's at a higher altitude. I loved going back to those first 12 weeks. I loved the culture and being of Costa Rica culture, right? So at Heredia, there's probably 10 other expats in the city, in the whole city, right? So everybody I interact with is a local, is native to Costa Rica. All my neighbors, all the local restaurant owners, the business owners that I've collaborated with, and I love that. I don't want to throw any judgment on any other expats who decide to live in beautiful paradise in Guanacaste. Obviously, like I just knew it wasn't for me, and I wanted, if I was going to live in Costa Rica, I wanted to live with Ticos. And I get that. I get noise. I get, there's a trade-off there. I'm now dating a Costa Rican woman. It's been 3 years we have together, and I speak Spanish. We primarily only speak Spanish together. I learned the language here, and that was a huge achievement for me. So I have a lot of pride in speaking Spanish every single day, using my Spanish for everything, whether it's social or business or whatever it is. I will say it gets a little tired when I have a 20-minute accounting meeting all in Spanish, right? But I have that pride of like, okay, I learned the language, I learned the culture, I've been accepted here, I've integrated super well. I want to be in the city. I want to be with Ticos. So this is my school. I started a school here, but this is kind of out the front door. Okay, so we're looking due south here. There's mountains to the south, and you can kind of see them up there. Mountains to the north.
Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
And so this is a very calm residential area. It's very quiet. It's not this hustle bustle that I'm used to in Chicago, and it's very community. So people aren't typically going to Walmart to go get a gallon of milk, right? There's a guy right on the corner that sells your milk and your eggs and your cheese and your tortillas, right? And I just fell in love with that. Like growing up in the suburbs, it's like, okay, get in the car, get in the minivan, let's go over to Target and spend $100 on groceries. It's like, man, I love knowing the guy right here in the corner who's got a brother that lives in the mountains 30 minutes from here, who's got a chicken farm. And once a week, he comes down and drops off 200 eggs. And that serves the community right here. These 50 homes here go to that guy for their eggs. And I loved that, that experience. Touching on nature, just north of here, I mean, we could be up in the mountains on a coffee farm in 20 minutes. And so that the hiking, the camping, it's all right up the mountain. And it's kind of more my climate that I loved. It's kind of like a fall weather Chicago or Wisconsin or Midwest of the US. It's a little chillier, right? We're wearing long pants, maybe even a jacket at night. And but I'm super grateful to be, like, just last weekend we went hiking with our new puppy. We got a new dog, and it's about an hour away. We're hiking through the jungle, more or less. I mean, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. I'd admit I'd love to do it more often than I do, but the option is there. But also that the different culture of being in the city Tico world and then the country Tico world is also super interesting as well. Because Chicago, you drive and drive and drive, it'll take you 3 hours to see a farm, right? To see a cornfield. Here, I mean, there's guys growing coffee in the residential area right here, right? So, like, there's guys with chickens right over here. So we can go up the mountain, and I'm now on these like historic coffee farm estates. And just as they are friendly in the city, they're friendlier in the country, right? And so I'm meeting guys on horses, and he's giving me a whole tour of his small little pineapple farm, and you know, he's raising pigs up there, whatever it may be. It's the pride in their work and the humility and humbleness they have for feeding their families. This just good men, you know, really good men. It's like they don't need the big car and the big house. They're just very happy, you know. And we'll drink a beer on the side of their farm, and I'll meet their horses, and it's like it's such a better experience than going, I don't know, to the chain restaurant in Chicago and spending $50. And there's something to that too, but I still love it here. I love it.
You love this, dude. This is
this
is your jam.
This is my jam, 100%. You're right.
Now, Chris, you loved it so much. You founded a school, as you mentioned just before, called TicoLingo, and you organize all the Spanish classes, you organize homestays, all the local activities, and adventure tours for the school, for people. I'm guessing they are expat students coming to Costa Rica for these programs. What's the most fulfilling part of your work? And tell us about TicoLingo, mate.
So like I said, I failed high school Spanish, avoided it like the plague in university, came down here, learned it really quick, right? My sister came down, she was blown away. She's like, Chris, how did you learn this in probably the end of that 3-month initial period? I was speaking conversational Spanish. And within 6 months, I had a girlfriend who spoke zero English, right? And my sister and I had another friend come down and visit me while I was here that first year, just blown away, right? I'm like, look, if you're just here, stay here for 2 weeks and you'll walk away speaking more than what you came with. And I started the school with that philosophy of live with a local community, immerse yourself in the local culture, and you'll learn the language 5 times better than you would at a university class in the US. And I get a lot of pride and joy out of seeing expats. Like you said, we welcome people from all over the world, from all ages, all walks of life, all backgrounds of Spanish, and giving them the opportunity to connect with a new community that lives life very different, right? Very uniquely in a very Costa Rican way, with regard to food and weekend activities and their dogs, right? But I think watching my students walk away with that, being able to speak Spanish, having conversations with locals that they thought impossible to have conversation with. And for a lot of Americans specifically, there's just a disconnect between Latino culture and regular US culture. And Spanish was always white noise. I grew up eating Mexican food every day, but I never thought about interacting with Mexican people, right? I always thought maybe I could, but how? That's impossible, I can't. And a lot of really wealthy Americans, their only interaction or their only experience with Latino culture is in restaurants or maids, and welcoming those types of clients down here to live with a family and see that these people have hopes and dreams and passions and pride for their country, for their work. It changes their entire perspective on life, and it changes their experience of these people, of Latino culture and Latino people. And so I get a lot of pride with that, sharing my experience with them, and seeing them not only walk away with an ability to speak Spanish, but also an appreciation for traditional Costa Rican culture and food and people, and a huge benefit to what Costa Rica can offer is that adventure beyond just the cultural adventure, but also the epic wildlife and biodiversity that's here. So we're doing, like you said, from 1 hour here, we can get to the beach, a rainforest, a volcano, a coffee farm, a waterfall, right? We can see animals of all walks of life, and then come back to the city and continue to be immersed in a genuine Spanish-speaking community, right? A classic Costa Rican traditional community. Why Costa Rica and not another country? I mean, the stability, right? The economic stability here is uncomparable when you look at somewhere like Nicaragua or Venezuela or even Panama, right? But also, yeah, that biodiversity is a huge draw. What I love about our little community is that a lot of it hasn't been taken over per se by American companies. There is a Walmart outside of town, but there is still a sense that support local businesses, not because it's trendy, but because that's what we've always done, and it's actually easier to do, right? It's also it's pretty easy to get to for people from the US and Canada. Well, I love the country. I think people internationally seem to respect it as well. I think being that tourism is such an important aspect of Costa Rica's economy, tourists they seem to be more welcomed here with open arms. Come into my home, like, let's hug, we're best friends. When I was traveling throughout Chile, that's not the case. They're not as welcome. There's not that warm sense of connection. But I think, yeah, having a connection a bit to American, movies and television. Whenever I teach English or I interact with English learners, they're always watching Friends. They're always, watching whatever, big blockbuster, giant Hollywood films. And I think there is a little bit of a connection. There's a respect for Americans. There's a respect for expats, extranjeros, and they do seem to be more like, come on in, like, tell me everything about you. Let me show you everything about me. And it's very easy to do that. It's almost too easy. I get myself into these rabbit holes where I went to the hardware store to buy a hammer, and now I'm like in some guy's backyard drinking a coffee with him, meeting his kids. It's like,
You gotta let it happen though, bro. It's the way
yeah,
life works here, right?
You can't resist it. It's like, just go a little slower, be a little more friendly, and so people know me around the area and the community, and I'm kind of the red-headed, blue-eyed, crazy gringo that'll sit and talk for hours about life, So
that is the best reputation you could possibly have, Chris.
Yeah, well, I think a huge aspect of our business is encouraging our students to interact with local businesses, with local families. So 99% of our students choose to live with a local homestay family that we organize, that we're connected to. And when I first started the school, it's like a lot of these families had no idea. They're like, okay, so you want me to put somebody who doesn't speak any Spanish in that back room? I'm like, no, it's going to be great. Like, just meet them, just share with them. Okay, I'll try it. And I've got families who've been hosting our students now for 4.5 years, 5 years. And there's this deep connection. They respect me for for connecting them with new cultures and new people. And a lot of them have children who are learning English, and they're so grateful for the opportunity to interact with native speakers. But yeah, I think through those homestay families and me going to visit them, you know, at least once a month, there becomes this like network of love in the community for me and the other gringos, the extranjeros that are coming through. And there's even more hugging going on then, right? Pre-COVID, hugs with masks, but no, it's a good time. It's a good time. Because of the phenomenal education system here, the phenomenal healthcare system here, there's a lot of younger people who they have pride in Costa Rica. They're proud Ticos, but they want to travel. They want to see the world. They want to learn new things. And they see that creating new connections with new people from different places is a valuable thing. That value, I don't know if that's universal, right?
I wanted to ask you about dating in Costa Rica and about your girlfriend, Montserrat. She is a Tica, a Costa Rican girl. Tell us about that.
Reflecting on my experience back in Chicago, if I wanted to go meet someone new outside of my work environment, outside of my social circle, I would get on Tinder, right? And so I got on Tinder back in 2015 and went on a few dates, and I found Monse through Tinder. And at that time I was speaking fluent Spanish, and I was actually looking to have a balance of like, I want to speak Spanglish, right? I want my girlfriend to be able to say hello to my mother, right? Who speaks no Spanish. And so I met Monse, super intelligent. She was an architect, is an architect, and spoke really good Spanish, really good English. She studied in Santiago, Chile, had a master's degree in architecture. And I was like, wow, like she's got more education than I do. This is next level. And I was a little intimidated. But no, we connected right away.
Mate, we're gonna wrap up in just a sec, Chris.
Okay.
I wanted to ask, how can people get in touch with you and in touch with the school?
Yeah, no, I'd say the absolute easiest is just put the words TicoLingo into Google, and you'll see all the different mediums and channels that you can contact us and learn more about us. So I've seen a lot of people who are thinking about moving here long-term get a lot out of a 1 week, 2 week program here. And it doesn't sound like a lot of time, but people learn a lot about getting a cell phone chip and how complicated that might be, right? We're like living without e-commerce. So some people are so accustomed to getting on Amazon and ordering everything and getting it there at your house in a 2 minute or two day duration. We don't have addresses here, right? The mailing system is pretty brutal. We don't have street signs. So I think people who are like, oh, I want to go live in Costa Rica, who might be considering it, go do a program like TicoLingo and really get a sense of like, can I do this? Is this something I could do long term? There's a lot of resources on the internet. There's a lot of ebooks and videos, but you got to really get in it and live it and talk to the people and try to speak the language, because Malcolm, I'm sure you've experienced, is like you can do a lot in English, especially in Guanacaste, but you get to points where it's like you need Spanish, you really do. So getting a sense of how quickly you're learning the language, or how much you really don't know, maybe, right? Some people may think they have a decent grasp on the language until they actually get here and they need to explain where their house is so that the guy for the internet installation can show up, right? That's like, right?
That's so much more complicated than Christopher's making it out to be, guys listening.
Yeah.
Like, there's no addresses here. For the most part, streets don't have names a lot of times, and it's exactly what you said. In other episodes, people have mentioned that they wish they spoke better Spanish before moving here. and that it was more important than they'd given credit to before moving.
Absolutely. And it's a huge benefit to not only avoiding getting ripped off, right, but also to connect yourself to the culture and the country that you're living in. And if you start a business, you're going to start paying taxes here, and if you have children here, you're going to have Costa Rican citizens, right, living in your family, right, that you're raising yourself. So you might as well get a base level of the language so you can interact with people who are born and raised here, interact with locals. I think it's super important.
Those are the people you're living with.
Yeah.
That's your community, right? And not to be able to communicate in depth on a really personal level with your community would be really disappointing.
Yeah,
to say the least.
Neighbors and like you said, you have a nanny and I mean just making friendships, right? And I've had a lot of expat friendships here, but a lot of people aren't in it they do a year, maybe they do a year and a half, they take a teaching job at a school here, and then they're gone, right? And my core like social group have been Ticos since day one. So
it's super clear that your core is now Costa Rica, Chris, and you've got, you've been here 5 years, you've set up a business that is a Costa Rican business that employs Costa Ricans, that helps out the local community. Like you said, that pays taxes. You got a Costa Rican girlfriend, and you've got no desire at all to go anywhere else. So this is where you're going to be, mate.
I think it might be. I mean, there's moments where I miss the convenience of Amazon.com. Don't get me wrong, but no, when I do the pro con balance, Costa Rica it always wins out, and I love my job, right? I'm not in a giant skyscraper in Chicago on the 15th floor. I'm on street level, seeing people every day, interacting with people who are in my community. I'm helping them, they're helping me, and it's a beautiful kind of synchronicity that we have here. And I'm not a cog in the system like I was in Chicago. I'm a key player in the community and the health, the education of the kids. I mean, it's 5 times, 10 times, 100 times more rewarding than sitting at a desk selling whatever I was selling back in the day. Google ads, right? It was not the route for me.
It's great you can recognize that, because so many people don't realize that deep down in our human nature, we want to be part of a community. We want to be a valuable part of how it works. We don't want to be, as you said, a cog. We all have that deep desire to matter and to have importance, and yeah, here in Costa Rica, there's plenty of ways, if you're a foreigner, that you could come and be a very positive part of the community here, no matter where you live, with the right attitude.
And welcomed, because you starting a business here isn't this exploitative venture like I've heard some of my friends say, right? You're welcomed here to start a business and try. I mean, it's a huge hill to climb, but at the end of the day,
it's a slower process than
super slow. It's
takes its time to get business.
Molasses.
Yeah, feels like molasses. Getting business registration and getting through the bureaucracy here definitely takes time, but it happens.
I think, yes, you will be welcomed here. At the end of the day, you're helping a local community, you're employing locals, and you're doing something good for the country. You're going to end up paying taxes. You're doing something that people will respect, and they'll respect you for being here doing it. So don't get the idea that they'll see a gringo or an Aussie or or whomever and run him out of town because he's not a Tico. No, that's not usually not the case.
Most people realize as well that if you come from the US and you have a very strong desire to make a lot of money, the best place you could do that is the US. The best
Right.
place you can stay to do that is the US. You don't move to Costa Rica to try to fulfill like a giant financial goal. You know, that's just not
No,
that's not the
no.
path for you. There's other reasons that people move here and they get pumped about it. Chris, thank you so much for your time today, mate. We're gonna wrap up the recording in just a second.
Okay, listo. Pura vida, eso.
Puro yeah.